But I want to welcome everybody who's here to our round two, take two, um, uh, conversation with Gerardo Sámano Córdova, um, the winner of our Balcones Prize for Fiction for Monstrilio, which is probably showing up in reverse, like I'm in a mirror. So oh, it's showing up good, good, good. All right. Hey, all right. Um, it's a fabulous book. I'm very excited that we're able to host Gerardo for a conversation. Um, and I cannot wait to hear not just the conversation we're going to have, some reading, some insights. I'm really excited about this. Um, Joining us to facilitate the conversation is Chris Gardner. Chris Gardner has been an educator in Texas for more than 25 years. He currently serves as an assistant professor of composition and literary studies at Austin Community College. When not reading, you might find him looking at birds, walking his dog, or weighing the pros and cons of a run, sometimes all at once. Thank you for being here, Chris. And Chris will be talking with Gerardo Sámano Córdova, who is a writer and artist from Mexico City living in Brooklyn. He is the author of Monstrilio, winner of the Balcones Fiction Prize, finalist for the VCU Cabell First Novelist Award, and named a book of the year by NPR, Elle, Goodreads, and others. He holds an MFA in fiction from the University of Michigan and is the current writer in residence at Fordham University. Gerardo has also been known to draw little creatures. And before we get into reading and Chris's questions, I hope we get to see at least one drawn little creature this evening. There's one right
There it is.
there. Look at that. All right. Thank you both for being here. Big welcome to both of you. And as we go here, I'm going to wrangle the chat. So if you have questions, throw them in the chat. I'm going to keep an eye on that and bring those in when we get to the Q&A. If everyone could kindly mute microphones, and I'll handle chat questions. I appreciate you all being here, and I turn the floor over. Thank you for being here. The floor is yours.
Great. This will go like most readings you've attended before. If you'll take a moment for us, Gerardo, and read that introduction for us, we'd love to hear in your voice that very first chapter.
Absolutely. And thank you for having me and welcome everybody. Thank you for coming. Okay, so this is the very beginning. Her son dies in a child-sized bed, big enough for him, but barely enough to hold her and her husband, who cling to the edges, holding themselves small so they fit one on each side of him. She savors the constant shifting and squirming needed to help to keep her in place. Her son was alive, and now he isn't. No thunder, no angels weeping, no cloaked death, no grace. Just his silent body, unbreathing, and the blunt realization that this is it. How dull, she thinks. She could scream, get on her knees, pull out her hair, curse God. Take me, she could plead, while beating her chest with her fist. She won't. She can't rally the drama she once imagined. In her fantasies, is it too morbid to call them fantasies? She doesn't think so. In her fantasies, her son died in a shopping mall, one of the big ones in Mexico City, because in a mall there is an audience, and she wanted an audience but thought dying in the street was too sordid. At the mall, her son collapsed, and as she held his little body in her lap, mall-goers surrounded her in hushed awe of her sorrow, unimaginable to all, while she became a pietà, marble and gorgeous. Tears, fat and clean, slid from her cheeks and pooled on her chin. When she imagined this, she cried along with her kneeling self. And now nothing. This is the moment, death, and not a tear. Perhaps she needs an audience, and her only audience in this room, this bright room, is her whimpering husband, and one whimpering man is no audience. Her husband nuzzles their son in the space the boy's squat neck allows, as if her husband were the fawn and her son the doe. Her husband squeezes their son with his whole body, arms, legs, head, and chest. He grunts as he squeezes. His breaths are loud against their son's neck, smelling him hard. She squeezes their son too, tries what her husband tries, because he seems to know how to grieve, and she doesn't. Her husband grabs her upper arm and pulls her toward the middle of the bed, toward their son. It seems her husband figures that if they push themselves hard enough, they might be able to bear him again. I bore him, she thinks. I won't bear him again. Her husband's blonde hair falls on her son's face. She sweeps it away with the back of her hand, even when she realizes he can't tickle her son anymore. Her husband lets go of her. He makes no sounds. Maybe he has died too. She's too tired to check. She's not too tired to leave the bed and open a window. A rush of cool air blows in. It's spring and the air is fresh, very undeathlike. Her hair is loose, and because it's loose, she feels it flutter on her neck. A quick flutter, not enough to whip her fully awake. She hasn't slept. She will, but not yet. A child's death is the worst, they say, but she won't die of grief. Perhaps her husband can. He is romantic. Their son's body will be taken away for cremation, then a funeral, black clothes, sad family, and sad friends. They are away from Mexico. In her fantasies, his death was in Mexico. But instead, it happened in this middle of nowhere house they have secluded themselves in. She feels anger, a faint anger, only a lighter flame of wanting to blame her husband. But her husband is too wretched to be blamed. In this house in upstate New York, surrounded by trees, an owl hoots in the mornings, thinking itself a rooster. Her son loved this morning owl, his tiny body wanting rapture. She listens for the owl, but perhaps he has already hooted, and she has missed it. She mumbles a list in order to hear something. There are events that follow a death, and this reminds her of her friend Lena, always thinking steps ahead. But what needs to come will not come yet. She's not done with her son, not yet ready to hand him away. Her husband is not dead, not sleeping, simply slack and raggy. She folds him. First, she folds his fingers into his palms, prying them from their son's pajamas. Then, from his wrists, she folds his fisted hands into his chest. His legs she pulls down off the bed. She enjoys his thick thighs and remains holding them for longer than she needs to, and he lets her, his muscles soft and heavy. His thighs are a comfort to her. Perhaps her touch is also a comfort to him. She swivels his head away from their boy, and her husband shuts his eyes, squeezing out tears. If she wanted, she could make her husband dance like a puppet, crawl him forward until he rolls down the stairs. But she won't do this. She holds his head close to her chest so he can muffle his sobs on her skin. She will let him lean on her as they walk out of the room, holding more weight than she thinks is possible. When he stops and asks to be let back into the room to see his son, she shushes him, says he needs to sleep. She walks her husband to their bed, where he curls, defeated. Their son is only hers now. She lies next to him and licks his ear, like an animal would. He remains dead. Her son wears cream-colored pajamas illustrated with silly dinosaurs in bright colors. He fits them in them, though were meant for a younger boy. He loved these pajamas. They show thinning patches where the soft material has wearied. He would have worn them exclusively, roaring his way through the day, if she hadn't forced him to wash himself and change. She wants to learn one last secret from her son. What part of a person's body is inextricably themselves? Not hair, though many people keep lockets of hair. Hair is too public and not a secret. His finger or his toe, this she knows well. How thin and long his fingers are, like her husband's, and how small and pudgy his toes, like hers. His tongue quick and lispy. His heart a quiet solitary heart, engaged to her and her husband. It has to be his lung. Her son Santiago has only one lung. This is it, this lung, the core of his Santiago-ness. She loves and hates this lung, a mystery to her, a tiny lung that carried her son way past his expected lifespan. She wants to thank it and also spit on it for not having carried him further. Mainly she wants to see the lung and hold it. Excavating one child isn't a difficult task if determined. First she has to break skin, easy with a sharp knife, and her husband keeps their knives sharp. A sharp knife is essential for a good cook, her husband claims, and he is a great cook. She performs the first incision on her son's belly with the utmost care, lest Santiago wake up in a sudden rebirth. He doesn't. Her next cuts become bolder. Once he is open, she sneaks her hand under her son's ribs. She will not break them to find the lung. She's no doctor. The procedure is messy. His heart does not pump anymore, so what oozes out is the blood his veins already carried. Years ago, she saw Lorca played, produced at the UNAM. She remembers the girl who played the mother, a mother older than the girl could ever be. The girl was a stupendous actor. There was a wedding, and at one point, she can't remember why, this mother kneels on the floor and delivers a short monologue about what it means to see blood spilled on the ground, her son's blood. The girl in the play mimicked soaking her hands in blood, and when she licked them, palms and fingers, her tongue swiped every side of them. Because the blood is mine, the mother said. There isn't enough blood for her to soak her hands. She smears and licks them with her tongue anyway. She savors her Santiago's blood, a taste of iron and warmth. She could suck more blood out of his veins, but she won't. She's not a vampire, though now she understands the impulse, the craving to drink deep and thirsty in her bowel. She finds his lung toward the right of his chest, lighter and more inconsequential than she thought it would be. She wants to rip it out and keep it for herself. She pulls, but not too hard, still thinking she can hurt her son. It won't detach. The bed is a mess. She whispers her son's name like an apology. Though she made this lung the same way she made the rest of him, she decides her son should keep his lung. She'll only take a nugget. With a paring knife, she slices a piece, the downmost tip. This chunk is hers. She takes the chunk of lung and places it in a clear jam jar her son used to keep pencils in. There's no lid, but she knows where to find one. She wraps her long hair in a bun and fastens it with a pencil. As best she can, she puts her son back together. She unfolds the skin of her son's open belly, soaks a piece of sheet in her saliva, and wipes dry blood off his body. Her husband comes in and freezes, trying to make sense of what he has walked into. She planned on changing the sheets and wrapping Santiago in a clean set to spare her husband of seeing their son's main torso. She doesn't know whether he will scream or hate her or understand her. You've destroyed him, he says, and she finds the word destroyed curious. Has she really? No, she has destroyed nothing. Nothing was left to destroy. But she has made a mess. Magos, he says her name, as if he could summon an explanation. Joseph, she returns his name to let him know that she sees him standing there, gaunt and pale green. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Um, there's so much packed into these pages, so much that comes back to us. Thematically, there's all the grief, there's the possessiveness, there's hunger. But we've also got all kinds of little bits that come back. The owl comes back for us, the pajamas come back for us. And I'm wondering when in the process of writing the whole book, the idea of doing the introduction in third person came to you. Was it always intended that way?
Yeah, I mean, so I had an earlier draft of this novel, and it was, um, I think it was mostly in third person, that draft. Um, but it didn't even start at this moment. It was like further into the future, and it was like it was quite different. But I wanted to know what would lead. So that novel started with like a boy that Magos and Lena find. And they kind of like rescue him, but the boy is kind of he wasn't a monster then, but he's kind of monstrous. Um, and then I was like, well, but I it wasn't working, and so I wrote what would make a boy, or like, is he really a monster or isn't he? So I wrote this first part, and I used Magos as the mother, um, and it was in third person, and I loved it. I loved the voice for that little section, and it just kind of flowed well. And so I decided to keep it in third person, and I think it worked well in like the beginning. And then it goes into like all the characters, like the four different characters, and they're in first person. Um, and um, and I considered making this as a part of Magos's section and just start from there. but it didn't have like the same kind of like air of introduction or like I don't know, it just seemed like sounded grander this way. I don't know. And yeah, and so I thought it would be like a nice little introduction to it in third person. And also you don't get names until the very end of this little chapter. And so it's a little bit you don't get to know the characters until a little bit later. So I kind of like that as well. So yeah, I mean, it just kind of happened, but I liked how it happened, so I
Yeah.
kept it.
Yeah, I think it does everything it needs to do. And the more I read it, the more I find in it. I think we're probably in a room full of readers tonight, but just in case, will you let people know what Magos does with that little nugget of lung?
Yeah, so she feeds the lung. She hears a story from Jackie, who is like the housekeeper in her mother's house in Mexico. And there's this she heard this story about like someone in her town feeding a heart, and then the heart becomes not exactly what the person wanted, but someone else. Um, and Magos is like, "Well, I have the lung. What the hey? I'm gonna try it. It's probably gonna rot anyway." But then he starts growing, and he becomes a little monster, who is Monstrilio, and then it all kind of like follows from there.
So, did you always conceive of the monster as evolving? He exists in so many. He's Monstrilio and he's M and he's MA and he's
Right.
Lung for a while. Did you always imagine him evolving, or did that happen as process?
It happened as process because um so at one point I had like a beginning that I loved, which is Mago's section. Like that introduction on Mago's section. It was pretty well, I mean, it was very advanced in comparison with the rest of the parts. And I also had a part where um Monstrilio is a young man. And I love that part too. So I had to get from a long to a young man somehow. And so the evolution had to happen. And it also gave the book structure. Um, like for me, it really helped because it's like, where are we in Monstrilio's physical being? What does he look like right now? So at the beginning, he's more like a lump of lung. And he starts being monstrous. Then he's like the furry little creature, which is like very feral but very lovable. And then he becomes kind of like a young man who doesn't really know who he is. And so I needed to get to those parts. And the one thing, and so to make him, um, so there's the part where with the arm tail. Um, and so that part was later in the process of revision because I needed something to make him into a boy. And because the book moves in like a magical realm, I can just say like, oh, he suddenly like became a boy or whatever. But I wanted it to be due to the other characters' decisions and a consequence of what they did, and it made the book better. Just because then they have like an investment. Not it doesn't just happen, right? They kind of make a decision to do something to transform him into a boy.
I think when I read the first blurbs of this novel, I think I expected something very different. I think I expected a more strictly allegorical book, something where the monster created is and remains expressive of Magos's grief. That's definitely how the creature is born. Uh, as her mother
Right.
says, he's the grief creature Magos made, and as Lena says, he's born of Magos's grief and prodigious unwillingness to let go. Um, but he becomes so very much more. And I'm interested if you yourself imagined a different novel. I mean, it sounds like the process here was pretty evolved and that Monstrilio kind of took over a bit.
Yeah.
But
So so
sorry,
yeah,
go ahead.
I'm sorry. So yeah, I mean, so the first part, it goes back to that original. So when I write, I kind of like just dive into it and kind of discover what's happening, and I have a million ideas in my head, and like I don't know, 80% of them don't work, but like a little bit do. Um, and so when I was writing this, there were many ideas, and because like I said before, I had like the Magos part, which is like if you just read the Magos part, it's an allegory for grief, like very like tightly packed into like metaphor, right? Um, her grief is a monster and it starts destroying everything around her. So, um, but I didn't want the book to be just about that because I thought like I really wanted to have the perspective of the monster too. That was very important to me. And also for me, so, I mean, a book can be just one big metaphor for something, and that's great. Um, but after Magos's section, I was like, well, I that part does it well, but now what, right? Like, I cannot just keep like insisting on the metaphor and be like, oh God, like, why do we have to keep reading? Uh, it's like we get it. She's grieving. And so, um, I think it was a process of like dismantling and kind of like transgressing against my own metaphor and kind of like being like, what else could this be? And so Monstrilio is also questioning like, how can I just be grief, right? Like if I'm a living sentient being, and that is very reductive for him. And so it's kind of like a commentary on the book, which I didn't want to be just about grief, but also about self-discovery and what that means, and if you owe anything to the people that create you, or all of those things. And so, even though grief is like a big motor of the book, it's not the only thing. Um, and it also helped me write 300 pages.
Always handy, always handy.
Yeah.
Um, so I think about teaching this book and all of the different ways you could build it. In some ways, it's like a Bildungsroman, that journey from innocence to experience, that growth novel. But it kind of ebbs and flows, and he moves in one direction and then another as he looks to find himself. And yeah, and I wonder if you could just talk about that process, about kind of the misdirections he takes as he tries to become himself.
I think it just, so for, so he has like a lot of forces pulling him in different directions. So when he's just like a furry creature with an arm tail, that's his simplest, happiest existence because nobody's like, maybe they keep him like in the patio or whatever, but no one's trying to change him from the core, right? Like no one's expecting him not to be a monster. They're just trying to handle the monster. But when he becomes a boy, he has to contend with the past that he was like this furry little creature that he can't be anymore. He has to contend with the fact that especially Magos thinks he's Santiago. So like fitting into like a dead boy's shoes. And he has some of his memories where he can access them. And so he's like, what do I do with this? But they're not his. He knows they're not his. And he's also becoming his own being, which he's very confused about because he doesn't know what to do with his hunger. If it's like a thing he should it's a thing he can't fully control, but it's also a thing he knows he shouldn't fully act on because the people around him tell him not to, but he doesn't really understand why not, because that's who he is. And so all these forces are pulling him. Um, so that process of discovery, I don't think it can be very linear. it's kind of like the forces keep pulling, and so you go one way, and then you see if it doesn't work, and then you go the other way and see if it works, and then you go back a little bit because that other one didn't work either, and you go backward and forward, and so it's a little bit chaotic. And also he's young and he doesn't know, like every young person, like you don't know what you're doing. And so that's also the process. So yeah, I think it just came naturally that and because also it's told from different perspectives, those perspectives kind of like have their own view on what Monstrilio or M should be. And so they help shape him, and he also kind of like has to push against that or accept it.
Yeah, I think as he is trying to define himself, everyone around him is trying to define him, and that push and pull is really useful. You've got Luke, who wants him to just unhinge the jaw and devour the whole carcass, and then you've got his father, who keeps saying, "Well, I mean, you can learn. You can learn to control this."
Yeah.
And I'm interested particularly in that relationship between M and Joseph. Um, his father is always saying, he can learn, you can be better, it's okay, you can do this. And clearly that's not who Monstrilio is supposed to be. But Thomas is the one person that can help him control those impulses, help him resist that hunger. And I'm interested in romantic love as opposed to paternal love as a force that can drive us to change, and was wondering if that was intended or if that just happened as Thomas became Thomas.
I think it just happened as Thomas became Thomas. Also, Thomas is a person that um M chooses. And that's outside the family. That Thomas is a person that is for M solely. Everyone else has like their own connection and they're kind of like all together. But for M, Thomas is for him, right? And like he chose him, and that's his own little piece of the world, if you will. And he's also discovering that there is a world beyond this family because the family is very close together, and they've kept Monstrilio very much a secret for themselves, right? And so with Thomas, he's discovering what it means to be vulnerable with another person or be with another person that doesn't necessarily know who he is or like what he is, but he doesn't know how to handle that fully, but he's exploring, right? And so Thomas, I don't know if like they could have stayed together if like Monstrilio would have been like, oh yeah, I give up my hungry ways. I don't think that would have been possible. But in that moment, and because it's brief and because they're also like in another place, everything is new and everything is possible. So I think there's that like honeymoon period where also for M, it's like maybe I can be a real boy, whatever. Um, so so yeah, I mean, I think Thomas for me was that moment of M kind of like exploring the world on his own and kind of like feeling like he can do it the way his parents want to. And in a way, also in a way that maybe he wants to at that moment. Um, but yeah, I mean, it all kind of comes crashing down. But yeah.
Yeah, crashing down, indeed. I said at the top that the introduction introduces a lot of those themes for us. We get that moment where Magos sympathizes with vampires. She's not going to drink all of his blood, but she gets it. And he M becomes not just Magos's grief creature, but his own kind of hungering creature. But everyone hungers in this novel. Everyone is wrapped up in desire. And I was wondering if you could talk about the ways hunger and desire play and shape characters in this novel.
Yeah, absolutely. Writing this, I was very interested in hunger and desire. Um, I think I think hunger moves us as humans a lot through life. I mean, like literal hunger, like we always have to think about what we're gonna eat, right? Or like earn money to have food, like basic survival. Um, and it's also hunger is also something that we don't know how to handle very well. We really put a lot of obstacles to hunger and a lot of guardrails to hunger, and that is very interesting to me. Hunger as like food hunger. We're like, well, but don't eat too much, or like watch your weight, or all of those things, right? Um, or don't eat too much of this, or don't eat too much of that. Like we spend a lot of time worrying about what we eat and how to manage our hunger. But that also translates to desire, and I think those are very linked. And like sexual desire, especially, it's also very linked to like appetites and like hunger, like food hunger, just because we control it a lot too. It's like don't have too much sex, or like, and we stigmatize it so much. And so hunger for us is something very scary for some reason. Um, I think it has to do with loss of control, or like being uncivilized, or um, all those stigmas that we have put on desire and hunger. And that to me is very interesting. And so that's why in the novel, people are also having sex and all of that, because I think it's very linked, like hunger. And for Monstrilio, hunger is hunger. And so sexual hunger and eating hunger kind of like overlaps much more. Um, he has he doesn't have to know why those two don't go together, or why he needs to control either. Um, and so for me, that was very interesting too, because um, hunger is such a like a big thing, and desire too. Um, and the control that we put on those things, right? It's very it's very interesting.
My mind just left me because you made me think of a different thing. Um, I've heard you talk. Oh, sorry, this is what it was. I love that with Monstrilio, it becomes so literal. When he is indulging his desires to their fullest, he literally becomes unhinged at the jaw,
Right.
and is just in it. I've heard you speak in other spaces about queerness as a default for this novel, and yeah, it became such a default that I didn't finish this with that in mind. But wondered if you could talk again about that, about the way queerness serves as a default, and the way, perhaps the way people's reactions to Monstrilio wrap up into that as well.
Yeah, I think so. So I wanted my characters to be queer and to be um default queer. Um, it's funny. I mean, we read so many books where all the characters are heterosexual, and no one questions that, right? Um, and sometimes, like with this book, it's like, oh, it's so interesting that all the characters are queer. And it's obviously on purpose. And it's also like, why can't all the characters be queer? Like, it's not that um that outrageous, I feel like. But I mean, I made a conscious decision that all the characters I wanted to write were queer. Also because I feel like I can write into queerness well. Um, and also because I wanted to write a queer book, in its form, in not necessarily that it explores queer themes, even though this book I think explores queer themes in like a from another shape maybe, but not directly, right? It's not about like a literal coming out story, or something like that, or but it is about acceptance, and it is about finding yourself, and it is about thinking yourself monstrous and not knowing what to do with that. And I think those are queer themes for sure. And so Yeah, and so there's the layer in which all the characters are queer, and this world does not engage with that, right? Like it's just how people are, and there's no questioning, there's no acceptance because there's no acceptance needed because no one's thinking about it. And I kind of wanted to imagine what it would be to write a book like that, where like the story, where the characters could be queer, but the story does not need to engage with the queerness, like the directly. Um, and it was fun. And yeah, even though the book itself, I think, does deal with queerness a lot, right? I think Monstrilio is, I mean, he's literally queer, but like he's also like embodies a lot of queer themes, right? And so yeah, I think those two layers came together.
Yeah, I think that yeah, I think that's a big piece of what underlies the tension that stays between him and Joseph too, right? You've got Uncle Luke, who is radically accepting. You've got Joseph, who's always trying to change him. At one point,
Yeah.
Joseph hasn't told his husband Peter. And Monstrilio asks him, "Did you tell Peter?" And he says, "No, I don't think he would understand." And Monstrilio still has to say, "Do you?" Uh,
Yeah.
and oh, that moment killed me. It just killed me. Um, when did you conceive of the four characters who would tell this? Uh, Magos, Joseph, and Monstrilio seem obvious to me, but Lena a little less so.
Yeah. Lena is also like she came from the very beginning in the very first um incarnations of this novel. Magos and Lena were together and they were like the main couple. Um and so Lena, I wrote a lot of Lena and I love Lena, and so she had to be in it. And I thought, or I think she brings that kind of idea of found family into the book more directly. Because she's not part of like the core family, but she's still like very in in it, right? And she suffers a little bit because of it because she doesn't know exactly what her place is. And so for me, she and Monstrilio have a lot in common in how they navigate the world to not knowing exactly where they fit. And so for me, Lena was an important character to keep in. Um, just yeah, just because she felt. I mean, I loved writing her, and I thought, let me try to see if I can, because right when the first part ends, Magos leaves with Lena, and so I was like, well, if I need the obvious next character would be Lena,
Mhm.
not Joseph, because Joseph's like is kind of like there somewhere. Um, but and so I started writing that, and it made sense. And then yeah, I think it wasn't the most obvious choice, but it was just like one of those, I guess, when you're discovering things while you write, one of those things that maybe you can't rationalize fully, but it still feels right. And so she's there.
Yeah. Speaking of the discovery that happens when you're writing, was there ever a moment when Monstrilio surprised you? Did you ever wind up doing something you didn't yourself see coming?
Um, I think some of it is like how mischievous and joyful he is as a furry creature. Um, and the part where, like, the part that surprised me most, I think, is when he starts talking to Santiago instead of like thinking it's his own mind. When I wrote that, when he like came, I was like, oh yeah, this is so right, and I didn't expect it. That there's that separation. So just that, like, writing to Santiago in his voice, that was like a big moment for me. That he can talk to Santiago, or like that he knows that Santiago is like maybe a part of him, but not it's not him.
Yeah, that was one of those moments where I had to flip back and be like, wait, 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 wait. Did I miss this?
Yeah.
And yeah, and then he has that moment where he faces it and says, "I don't know why I'm telling you all these things. You're never coming back."
Yeah,
And that feels like one of the last pieces that locks into place as he becomes entirely himself and
right.
stops becoming the Santiago that sometimes people wanted him to be.
Yeah,
Monica still calls him Santiago over and over, and he has to remind her he's dead.
yeah.
He's dead. Um, Fantastic. Do you have a favorite version of Monstrilio? Can you pick?
I mean, it's super hard to choose. I mean, just the furry little critter.
Yeah.
I mean, he's just so cute. But I love all incarnations. Obviously, like him as M, it's like the most endearing, um, just like because he's the most complex then. Um, so yeah, I mean, it's very hard to choose. I think I love all of them.
How do we feel about the cover?
I love the cover.
I
It doesn't, yeah.
Please go ahead.
So one of my so when we started like thinking about covers, I did this PowerPoint presentation in which like I just put like covers that I liked and covers that definitely I didn't like. Um and on the last slide I was like, you can take inspiration from these. I think I put three or four designers that I really love. Um and they actually hired one of them to do the
Oh, wow.
cover, Alex Merto. And so when he did the cover, when I got it, I saw it and it was like nothing that I would have imagined, but exactly what I would have liked. And so I love it. The like at the beginning, like in theory, I was against of having like an embodiment of Monstrilio in the cover because I thought like people would just associate instantly that that's Monstrilio. But that monster in that cover is perfect because maybe it doesn't look exactly like my imagination, but it has the same spirit, like the mischievous kind of thing. And it's super eye-catching. And it's from a painting from 1700. Um and it's called The Nightmare. And that guy is actually sitting on a woman in the painting, so it's a crop.
Oh, wow.
Uh, So
Who's
yeah, it's a Dutch painting. Abelgaard, I think his name is the painter. Um, and so I mean, I don't know. It just felt really cool and both very modern and it has that very old-timey monster in it, which I love. So yeah, I mean, I loved it.
Yeah, I think it's magnificent. I kept waiting for Monstrilio to turn into that version of the monster and was
Yeah,
delighted that he never did exactly. He,
yeah,
he becomes a much more interesting version of himself. Uh,
yeah,
we've got time left, and if anyone else has questions, we'd love to hear those questions.
yeah, absolutely.
I'll kick this off. I'm always curious about the origin of the physical origin of the monster. Was there something specifically that drove you to a piece of the lung, or for that to have been the
Mm.
original obstacle to life that then became the gate to the afterlife? Was it something specific about the lung, or were there other iterations that you might have thought about or tried out?
Yeah, it was always the lung. Obviously, one can think of the heart first, but I thought it would be too obvious, right? Um, but also I knew that Santiago needed to be ill, and having a lung problem kind of allowed for those episodes of breathlessness that are very evocative and like really hard because it's like you're drowning or you're suffocating. And so I knew that his ailment had to be like very physical that way. Um, and so the lung became the thing. And so, and I also, um, and because I knew it would be like some respiratory um condition, I read that you can survive with one lung, and I found that really interesting. Because the lung kind of like takes the job of both lungs. Um, and so I thought that was really cool and like you're missing a part of yourself, but you can still survive. And so that's why I made it that.
Thank you for that. Interesting to think about survival versus thriving and how
Right,
leaving a piece of us behind still gives us some
right.
portion of that, right? Prudence would like to know a question in the chat, what you are reading lately, and is it for pleasure or for work writing?
Yeah, so I'm finishing The Vegetarian, which is a reread because I love it so much.
Mhm.
Um, I read Brother Bronte by Fernando, um, who was the one who chose me for this prize. Um, and that was wonderful. Um, um, oh, I read this book, Optional Practical Training. It's a new book, and I'm terrible because I'm blanking out on the author's name, but it's such a wonderful and unexpected book. Um, and how intelligent it is, and like all it's a book about this woman who's during the time after you're an international student here. After that time, you have optional practical training, which allows you to stay in the country and work for a period of time. And so she's in that year, and she kind of like goes, she meets people and she just has conversations with them. And I mean, they're so fun and illuminating and unexpected. Like anything from like talks about race and immigration to math and how you teach math and no, it's really, really fun and I would totally recommend it.
What books are you using as you teach your students these days?
Um,
Or I guess
so
are
I
you
most
teaching this semester?
yes, I mostly teach with short stories because it's workshop, and so it's not super like I don't know what that is, but like reading. But I mean, obviously they have to read a lot because writing is reading, right? And so, but I feel like it's easier for me to kind of like introduce them to many different things through short stories than reading like a whole book and then limiting that. Um, but I mean, we read everything from Donald Barthelme, to Carmen Maria Machado, to um, uh, oh my God, I always blank out with names, but yeah, I mean, I just I just try to have like George Saunders, um, who I love, and it's funny because most students find him very difficult to read, which I never thought it would happen. Um, just to like get into like the way he writes. Um, and yeah, I mean, it's just like different thing. I'm teaching an experimental workshop right now too, which is really fun because we read like really weird pieces and like short pieces and like so it's also that's a lot of fun too. So yeah, I mean, I try to vary as much as I can. Um, Alice Munro, like I throw one of her stories in there. Um, so yeah, I mean, it just I try to vary stuff.
Another couple of questions in the chat. I'll take Caden's first. Have you heard of the TV series Yellow Jackets?
Yeah,
Yeah. Have you? I have not watched it. Have you watched any of it?
yeah. I watched the first two seasons. I think there's a third one now.
Yeah. What am I missing out on?
Um, it's great. I love it.
It's
That's fair
great.
enough.
Um, um,
All
it's
right.
it's mystery. I love how like this like between the past and the present and how you start to discover not so I mean obviously there's the mystery of what they actually did or what the hell is happening, but also the character development and how they're like in the present they're kind of like they have their past selves in them, which for reasons of survival had to be crueler and more animalistic in a way. And they still have that in their present, but they're trying not to show it, but then it comes out anyway. So I love that.
Seems like your answer to that, to your description of it, kind of makes a connection for me about why Caden would ask that question, hanging on to parts of ourselves that are crueler so we can survive, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Prudence has a student reading Heinlein who likes to and Heinlein likes to recycle characters. Do you have future plans for the characters in this novel, or future plans for other characters you have written?
No. Maybe. I mean, I'm not against the idea, but for now I'm like, no. I mean, they're good where they are. Yeah. But maybe you never know, like in 10 years I may be eating my words. I don't know.
Are you at work on the next, or is that the worst question to ask?
I am at work. Hopefully soon. I'm closer to finishing than I'm to beginning, if
Hey,
that makes sense.
yeah.
So so yeah, I'm excited. It's yeah, it's fun to read from Monstrilio now and see. I don't know, like I feel like I'm much more critical of my writing while I'm writing,
Mhm.
sometimes, and then I read Monstrilio, I'm like, oh, I'm not that bad. But uh, uh, but also like I have to remember that this has gone through many iterations of revisions and editing and all of that, right? And so what you when you're writing um doesn't necessarily need to live up to anything. Um so yeah. Um so yeah, it's a process, but I'm very excited about it.
I'm glad that you can look back on it with anything like the delight that I read it with. It is, I've been through it over and over already, and
Oh,
I'm
thank
really
you.
grateful for your time this evening. I'm even more grateful for the novel itself.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's got a place in me, and I appreciate
Oh,
all of the work that you do and all of the the kindness you bring in making this happen despite the ways the winds tried to waylay us.
right. They tried to make yellow jackets out of me. Like at one point in the plane, I was like, because there was a team of like, I don't know, like a varsity female team of some
Oh
sort. And I'm
no.
like, this is yellow jackets. They're gonna eat me. This is what's gonna happen now. But I survived that. So
Well, that's another thing I'm grateful for.
yeah. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your time. Thank you to all of our guests for being here,
Yeah, thank
for asking
you.
questions when you had them. Thank you, Eli, for putting this together. Thank you, Prudence, for making it
Thank
happen.
you.
We
Thank
appreciate
you. Thank you.
everybody.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.